you gonna get free this time? Falling into a blue sky mind. Came to me in that song, my friend.
Hello there, beautiful humans. It's Dr. Deborah here. Just wanted to speak to you before this episode begins because it came to my attention in speaking with a friend that the very thing that we spoke about in this conversation about being judged and really acknowledging that judges exist and also how they show up in our lives. When I was done with this conversation, I was like, I don't know, Crystal, I feel really judgy about this episode. We talk about this a lot on here, is that we can have these uncomfortable feelings, these elephants feelings that are less acknowledged in general for ourselves, and have the awareness of the comedy and the paradox at the same time. And I think I was having that. And part of what happens in these episodes is that the themes come up through our lives and through working with all of you and people tableside and our lives in general. So I was already in this soup of judgment, which then brought up how I and how Crystal have considered how to relate to judgment in ways that feel more supportive and feel more useful in our lives. So it's already resonating to me. And then we have the conversation. And one of the things that you'll listen to what we're talking about is that as we become closer and deeper in meaningful relationship, you can count on that will illuminate the judge within. And that can be to self or to that other person. So I realized now, after listening to this podcast, because sometimes we record and you won't actually be listening to it till 3 or 4 weeks later. And so I listened to it about 3 weeks later, and this is this gap space, like bringing the space forward and that time that allows for something else to come in and be perceived differently, more wholefully. So I listened to it and I was like, what? I don't think I don't get why I didn't like this one. Like, there's so many great things. And I was inspired in two things. Number one, I was like, wow, I'm really practicing this stuff. And number two, Crystal and I had a conversation that came out from this, of some of the things that was important for me to share, and then how we were conversing about it, that elephants come up with us all the time, and the power of how we have been able to use sacred agreement and the choice to be each other's witness in life in such a sacred way, and to swim and to the gap magic space, that my relationship has deepened, our relationship has deepened and continues to do in ways that give me courage to enter into other relationships with that same capacity and choicing of having these bigger conversations. And it's been super powerful. So I had to laugh because I was sharing with a friend. I was like, yes, I'm doing a judgment episode. And I was really judgy at the end of it. We hope for you that the paradox is right alongside with you in the same way and listening to this. It's like, oh gosh, yes, because exploring in this case where the judges sit in you and what they do and how they impact you or maybe others in your life can sometimes be uncomfortable. And the other part is giving you a bigger conversation that welcomes you into that gives you permission to have that part of you included in your life. It's also why we give you tools. And one tool is just the space and the gap that's created in the conversation. I want to let you know that your judges, all of them, are welcome and held and loved through this whole conversation. May you find it inspiring, and may you find it as an avenue to go deeper into yourself and deeper into relationships. See you in the episode.
How you gonna get free this time? Falling into a blue sky mind.
So we're back. You, me, and the elephant. Here we are with Deb Air.
Crystal clear, baby.
Yes. Here's the thing, Crystal. You will be judged.
Mm.
Now what?
Say it ain't so.
Say
If
it.
that's true, if I will be judged, then more than likely I'm going to judge too. So there we go.
Ooh. Are you
Mm.
telling me you're a judgy pants?
I'm pretty sure I got the t-shirt in my closet somewhere. Probably the underwear too. Yeah.
So I guess this is a question to all you listeners. Have you ever felt judged? Have you ever been worried about being judged? Have you ever either stopped what you were doing or changed what you were doing because of the worry of how you would be judged by something when you maybe had a desire to do something else? Have you ever had a critic judge, like a self judgment that feels like you are less than, that you could kick yourself and, I wish I said that. Have you ever had that? We're just going to pause and let you just consider that for a moment. And while we're pausing, I'm going to speak.
You digest that. So all the judgments come flooding in. We're all like, now you just sit with that. They're like, oh,
yeah, right. So if you're
crying,
right now because you see how much you've been judged and how much you judge yourself, we're right on track.
I'm uncomfortable. Like I'm already sweating just a little bit. I'm like, oh my God, am I gonna have to answer this? What's happening?
Yes, you are, Crystal. Get ready, baby. Here's how we define judgment in our culture. And there are really two ways in which it's defined. And one way is that there's a calamity, that there's something that has been done wrong, and there is a judgment that's, placed upon that calamity, that wrongness. And therefore, within that judgment, there's a punishment that's on the other end of that. Right? If you grew up with a religion that says certain things about who you can be with, who you can't be with, let's say, and you have feelings of something else, or you do something that you shouldn't, that goes against the tenets of that religion, then you will be judged. And those rules are there to prevent you from being or doing certain things that will be harmful. And if you will be judged, you also will be punished, right? If you do this, you will go to hell. It's not all religion, but I'm just using some of the stronger examples because even our own words that become punishing, words to others, words to self. And if you trickle back into the Gap episode, we talk about how what we are observing and what meaning we give to something influences the field around us, that our judgments are influential, whether it's unknown to us, like our invisible judgments. So this is one aspect of what I feel that the aspect of judgment, or the definition of judgment that we use often, that often our judgments have some aspect of punishment too, or on the other end of that. The other definition version of judgment is really what I would call an active discernment, a clarity. It's like the ability to take in information and ingest that, see what feels true, and be able from that information digest it into your own wisdom that allows you to take some clear action that brings you, what I would say, in alignment, like forward movement in alignment with yourself or within the things that you are desiring, and or whatever that thing is that you may be wanting to move forward into. So there's this judgment that is connected to punishment, and then there's this judgment that is more of a discernment. And what we're kind of vying for today is how to really look at how do we use judgment and what is the purpose of judgment. I think we utilize both, but I think that when we talk about the fear of being judged. And even if we don't realize, we may not verbalize, check in with what you do or don't do, how you dress, what you say or don't say is somehow influenced by how or what people will think about you, because that is the sneaky aspect of the fear of being judged. And why we even named this particular episode is that you will be judged, is that there will always be judges. It is how we discern, to go back to the aspect of judgment that is a discernment. It's how we interpret the world. It's how we freeze it in space and time just long enough to be able to make a decision in a moment, to be able to take action. So we need our judges.
Mm-hmm.
But just even knowing that, we're not going to pretend they don't exist like the elephant, that they by nature exist in our humanity. And how is it that we can see how we're utilizing judgment and how we can optimize or really illuminate this in a way that allows us to get closer to ourselves and closer to the people we love. There's this saying, keep your friends close and keep your enemies closer. And if a lot of how we judge ourselves and a lot of how we are secretly either worried about being judged or, quite honestly, that we judge others or situations, these are aspects when any of that judgment has some kind of polarity or punishment, judgment within it, that's really an expression of an enemy. So all these parts that you judge in yourself potentially, or you judge in others or about the world, I want us to just take that into the bigger conversation, take that into the circle and say, you know what, judges always exist. We might as well get to know these judges really, really well. Because anything that you are worried about being judged about, there's always a bigger judge, and that's the judge of self.
I was sweating less until you said that. I was like, "Oh, I love my judges. Come on in." And then you were like, "There's a bigger judge." And I'm like, "Damn it." Now the truth is really out. My
Right.
elephant, I had my eyes closed. I just smacked right into
You
the
just,
elephant.
you know, it's nothing like smacking into the elephant. Well, I believe that our self judgments and even our judgments about others, whether you confess that you have them or not, we all do.
Mm-hmm.
They're really an expression of our unsaid fears. Many of us have done this. If we see people and they're in love and they're kissing and there's like that public display of affection, and maybe it's not your thing, or maybe you're not experiencing that in your own life. And all of a sudden you say, oh my God, like, what are they? Who do they think they are? You know, they're da, 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 da. We can say all these things, or somebody's wearing something that maybe they look amazing in, but you're feeling judgment about your body that day. And you go, oh my gosh, that person, blah, 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 blah. There are so many easy, flippant, loose, even that you never say out loud judgments that are happening all the time. We do it on a micro scale with ourselves. We do it on the macro level with the world and our communities and our families. Oh my goodness. The more we have judgments that repeat themselves, the more there's absolutely no space for that judgment to grow out of itself, for something else to emerge, for some healing, or for some bigger conversation, or for you to be able to see, let's say, a family member differently, because you already have that judgment that's wired in your system. One of the things that you can recognize is, are you seeing this repeat itself? It's like, oh, well, they're just going to do that because they always do. That's an example of something that's hardwired. And we do that with ourselves too. I can sometimes scramble in at the last minute to things. And I have certainly had self-judgment about what it's like to be on time or not on time and what that means about my character. I remember one time my son saying I was leaving and I decided to, I don't know, make my bed or do, I have no idea what I was trying, but I was doing something right when I was leaving the house. And he's like, is that really the best time to do that? And it was those kinds of feedback, even with myself, or in that case, him, allowed me to look at that for a moment and self reflect and think, why is it that I do that? That no matter what, I could get up zillions of hours before I have to leave the house, but it doesn't matter because there is a self judgment underneath me being on time that will produce the environment just perfectly to get me rushing out of the house because I've conditioned myself to do that. In order to be valuable, I have to feel that stress and I'm going to rush out of the house. Point is that we all have these judgments that influence what we do and what we don't do. And many times underneath that are the fears or the things about ourselves that we just don't want to look at or feel.
Yeah. Yeah. And fear itself is stopping you in your tracks for a reason. I mean, there might be the threat, of course, assess and get yourself safe. But then there's also this awareness that your intuition is coming online and it's like, hey, pause. And it's interesting that judgment is connected to this invisible fear. And if we would pause on that judgment, like you said, get curious, underneath that reveals more than the judgment itself. And it comes back to, well, what is it? What is it that's coming up in you that's maybe caused you to project that judgment out? Yeah,
Like,
totally.
what does that serve? And that's one of the questions. What is what I'm saying? How does this serve the moment? I have caught myself in these moments where I'm like, you know what? I'm going to stop talking because I will start to recognize an incongruency. Like I'll have a feeling in my gut and it kind of moves up the front of my body. And I'll say, I'm going to pause because I feel like I'm saying things that it's something feels off. And that's usually when things are too hard to be with or that we're even unconscious of, it's very easy to project it out because it projects the energy away from the experience. We talked about sacred agreements, and I believe that if we had more sacred agreements within our relationships, I believe sacred agreements spawn safety. They spawn deeper conversations, more vulnerable conversations, the ability to truly practice transparency. And we talk about these words a lot, but what do they actually mean to us and how do we actually embody them more? I believe if we had more sacred agreements, which just means that, you know, maybe in your relationship, you come to the table, whether it's your kids, a partner, friends, even coworkers,
Mm-hmm.
and say, once a week, we're going to check in and we're going to say, hey, what are some of the things that we're challenging? And that we have certain tenets that say, you have the floor when you have the floor. My job is to listen, is to witness, and I will have the floor and your job is to witness. And then we come together and there's just certain things that say, no matter what, I said this to someone the other day, tableside, how does it feel if I was to say nothing you can say or do will take my love away from you? Nothing you can say or do will take my love away from you. Because the reality is we are clustered and cluttered with judgments. And when we are getting deeper in relating to people, those judgments will fire off as polarities, as judgments against. Because what we do to protect ourselves is when we start feeling that discomfort, we may lash out towards initially, right? And some of the worst, and you're seeing this rampant right now, I think, since the pandemic, and it was already a massive, speaking of calamity, is mental health and is self-hate. Like I said, the biggest judge is the one that is quiet behind the scenes and it's tearing us apart inside. So to come back to being able to create an environment, even if you have one person or two people or a family, where you can create some sacred ritual around those sacred agreements, that they spawn and nurture more safe conversations and therefore a softer landing pad for those things to come up. And if you're in a moment and you say, hey, I'm in a moment and I have a really charged experience, so you may hear judgments. Can you just be there with me? Can you just witness and do nothing but that, and know that underneath all of this judgment and fire that might come out of my lips, that there is a scared person under there, that there's a person that just wants to know she's okay and that she is loved, and nothing I can say or do is going to take that away.
Wouldn't the world be a better place if we all had those glasses on and those judges were spearing at us, and underneath that, or in the meantime, we're dodging it, right? We're like moving back and forth, like, oh, judgment, judgment, judgment. And you sneak in a hug. You're like, boom, I got you.
Right. The thing is, I think because we don't have the conscious sacredness in our relationships where we just bring some of those invisible things to light and say, hey, these things are important. Can we have these parameters? And it doesn't have to be business-like. It's just being able to create a container in which you can actually platform off and springboard off into a more freer version of yourself. That means that if within that sacred agreement, that there will be judges that are going to come out, because judges exist. And the reality is my micro judges against myself are the macro judges that exist in our world. And one of my examples that came up as I was thinking about this is I used to have a partner and he loved to take candid shots of me, and he would just see me in a state of joy and he would just be clicking pictures. And I originally freaking hated it. And why I hated it, it was because I felt uncomfortable that he might take a shot of me that's a bad profile, or I might be making a funny face, or maybe I have something stuck in my tooth or whatever. It was my own judge within myself, and it had nothing to do with him. But if I couldn't come to grips with that, then I could never have a deeper conversation with him that said, hey, this is what comes up for me. And I could never see the love behind what he was doing, that he was just wanting to capture the essence of me. Because that's sometimes the best, right? When someone doesn't know their photos being taken, there's no editing in my behavior. There's just me being me. And so one day he takes this picture and I look at it, and instantly in my gut, I was like, oh, this is horrible to say, but I felt like I wanted to vomit. And part of me was like, oh, I just don't want to feel that. And I asked him right away, I was like, can you delete this? And I had enough awareness that that I was sad that I even felt that way. B, that I knew he was doing it because of just love for me. But then I asked him, can you delete this? And then once I asked him to do it, I was able to have like this flood of emotion came in, because I saw the wrinkles and I saw the way my nose looked. And I was literally in a moment, anyways, like I was horrified that I was so fucking ugly and unworthy of love. And then this other wave came in. So that was the micro. And I pretty quickly was like, that's bullshit. Now, logically, we can understand that something is not true, but that our emotions and our embodiment has a different story to it. So I was feeling that incongruence and I was pissed off at that incongruence. And then I got this huge wave and I was down on my knees and I started crying. And he's like, what's going on? And I was so upset that this is how I see myself in this picture. When I see a wrinkle or I see my nose look a certain way. And I just was horrified because this is so indoctrinated in me on a macro level of what beauty looks like, what makes a woman look beautiful. And it's bullshit. And I know it. And yet I feel it. And then I could just feel like millions of women and their suffering and how they judge themselves. So again, with every sort of micro internal judgment, there is a macro judgment that exists. And to go back to the gap, it's when we can bring more awareness to those judgments, because underneath that moment for me was the fear that I would never really truly be loved. It wasn't even the fear that I'm not beautiful. It's that who would love that? Who would love me? And even though I was being loved It doesn't matter.
Right.
Someone can love you and they can give you all of their attention. But if you cannot feel that judge and connect with that judge inside and see the fear that's under that, can you even unlock your capacity to receive that love?
In this case, your bigger judger had showed up, the one that's judging yourself.
What's crazy is I'm just realizing, as you just said, that that bigger judge came in, but I was aware of that and that big judge. And I have literally for years pierced through that veil and loved myself and even forced myself to look at different angles and be like, baby, I love you. You are so freaking adorable. You're sexy. You're brilliant. You're beautiful. Look at that little where you broke your nose. It's so sexy. Like I have really had this almost a career in piercing self-love. And what happened in this moment is that bigger judge showed up, which then was able to unlock the feeling of where that global or more macro judgment even came from. And where the sadness came in is that that was such a global judge that is so quiet and so insidious. Can you use these judges? Can you bring your enemies close so that you can discover parts of yourself which you can illuminate and merge with some love and attention that allows that to not only illuminate for yourself, because every time you do that, you broaden the conversation and capacity for yourself.
That's
So
right.
who you decide to be, what actions you decide to take. If I didn't have enough trust in myself and love for myself and trust that I have something worthy to give, I would never be doing this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
That is not to say that a next layer of judge, and we've talked about this in different episodes too, right? That comes up. Is this even worthy? In fact, it was the Sacred Agreement episode where we talked about, well, will anybody even listen to this? And we said, at least our star family will,
That's right.
right? Because if we can understand that there's never ending judge, can we allow that to bring us into more discernment? Can we allow that to bring us into more clarity? Can we allow it to break us out of prison? Where if we are in more sacred agreement with others, we can now speak some of those fears, those things that we're so afraid to say because let's say we're afraid to lose love. If we can begin to create containers where we can say those scary things, I will promise you that your judgment ratio, where there's punishment, whether it's to yourself or you're judging others, like I could have got pissed at my partner and not even realize why I was pissed at him because he, by his love and him taking pictures in these candid moments, ignited that self-judge in me. If I wasn't able to see that, I would have absolutely made that about him. It would have been a fight. It would have been something like, why do you always do that? It's so annoying. When we are afraid and we don't have a space to speak our fear and to really be loved and heard in that, then we will project it immediately. Can you create self-sacred agreements? Can you write down in a journal the things that matter of how you want to be treated? And what the important tenets of how you want to be treated by yourself. And what are the flags that come up when you start to have a self-talk? And can you create a journal that anytime you have that inner judge, that inner critic that comes up, you write it down and you just see it. There was one time I came home from a workshop that I did and I feel like I bombed. And I came home and I was so upset at myself. And I knew it was ridiculous. So I looked in the mirror and I said, Deb, you are a piece of shit. You do these free workshops because you're mean and you don't care about people. I went into this rage of ridiculousness just to break into that judge that was coming up that I am not worthy to be heard. And then I started crying and then I started laughing. And it was just like this breakthrough moment where I was like just saying the most ridiculously horrible things to myself, which were so blatantly untrue that it then brought the humor into it, which made me realize, like, oh my God, this is silly.
That is it's an important practice that you did that witnessing for yourself, because to go back at the beginning, it's like that's where that bigger judger gets some ground to stand on. When we just let it be bathed in every thought as we're doing the dishes or walking the walk, and in our mind internally, we're going, you know what, you suck, you suck, you suck, you did that wrong. Blah, blah, and we just keep it in there like la la la. It builds and it hurts and it stings. So the fact that you were like, I give you the mic, big judger, let's see it. And then you witnessed
Yeah.
yourself in the mirror. Oh man, like this is, and look how quick that transformed into something else. And the silent killer is the wounds that our heart takes from not even writing it down in a journal or saying it in the mirror or even sharing it with a friend and let someone just hear you do your swamping moment. Those are key practices. They are. The desire list that we're doing right now. We're writing down 10 desires for the 30 days. There was a huge judgment at the beginning. And I was like, just keep writing. Just keep writing. I had someone share or heard a podcast, and someone shared that she keeps 2 journals. And in one journal, she does that. She like lets this swampy, just mind dump of just everything, get it out, get it out, get it out. And then the second journal, she's like, okay, now these are my truths. These are my agreements. These are my self agreements here. But I had to be with and witness the judgier parts because they're not to be tossed out. They're meant to be included. Let's bring them along. That contrast of what we didn't want brings clarity to what we do want. And the person we should do it for first is ourselves, or we can't do it for the other person, not authentically. We can tell a mile away. They may be saying something or advising something, but if that's not true for them, we know it.
There's so many things in what you just said. Well, first of all, you made me think of Christopher Reeves. And if those of you that remember, he played Superman, other things too. But then he had an accident, fell off a horse and became paralyzed. And he once said that every morning he had a beautiful wife, beautiful family, and he was paralyzed, I want to say from the neck down. I might not be right on that. And he just didn't want to get up out of bed in the morning. And so he started this ritual for himself where he just said, I'm going to give myself 20 minutes to feel so shitty and feel bad about myself and feel all the horribleness of how my life has changed. And then at the end of that 20 minutes, I'm going to get up and I'm going to be, and it kind of reminds me of what you're saying, is this permission to go there. I think it's both, honestly. Like you said, yes, we know that. And if we're really in tune, we do know when people are bullshitting us or that we're bullshitting ourselves, or we're like, how are you? I'm fantastic. I'm great. It's wonderful. Or it's like, there's so many insidious ways in which we judge. We can give a compliment, but we've heard of the backhanded compliment. Judges swing into the moment so effortlessly. And I think this is just a great time for all of us to just notice and really be honest as much as possible with ourselves. Where are those little slight-handed judgments that we don't recognize right away, that are so subtle and are so part of the fabric of how we communicate? And can you just get curious? Because sometimes looking at your judgments and how much you may start to recognize how you may judge other people or other things may just really light up that self judger of you. And so I think that being able to have 2 things, being able to have this journal where you can just see it, write it down. It's kind of like I did. I looked at myself and I said, okay, and you said this so beautifully, like, judge, have it, give me what you got. Give me what you got. Because behind that judge, I know there's a scared little girl in there. I know that. And I was like, you give it to me. Anything you say or do will not take my love away. It's really, I didn't realize I was doing that, but that's what I was doing. I was like, give it to me. Give me all you, give me the worst things you can give me. Tell me how shitty I am. Tell me all these things. And it was so ridiculous that then I was able to feel the the tears that I wasn't loved, that I didn't do a good job, I wasn't good enough. And then the laughter came in when I was like, oh my God, this is so insane and so untrue.
Mhm.
And I was able to go through the range of emotion that allowed me to transform or transmute the experience, which then honestly has allowed me each time to go into whether I'm giving a workshop or I'm doing a podcast or whatever it is, to just be more and more me and be less worried. We were just having this conversation, right, Crystal? The more we just have a conversation on here and let the energy flow versus having to have everything perfectly said and did we make all the points, things get dry, they get more confusing versus just feeling into the moment and being more into the organic rhythm between you and I.
Like that authentic meter, when it goes off in yourself, you know it's going off in the field. So it's such a good marker when you have that
Mhm.
come up. And maybe it's the judgment, maybe you recognize the fear. It's just that part that feels less included. And it gives new meaning for me, the phrase that we've heard, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And now I'm like, yeah, I'm bringing my outside enemy with me. I was like, come on, buddy. I know you like didn't get invited to the party for 25 years, but I'm inviting you now. And it's this new way, this cleaner lens to view that these judgments, sure, they can go in the enemy category, but I don't throw them out. I'm going to get curious about that enemy because, like you said, underneath that is the fear of protection somehow, some way. And if we just keep tossing it aside and eliminating it, it just builds, it festers, it mutates into something else. So let's keep our enemies closer and not for the same way that we've heard it before in this new inclusive way.
Yeah. You just said something that really sparked something. You said it mutates into something else. I truly feel that the more we allow these pieces and these judges to be unchecked, it's like we're exonerating. These are the places that we exonerate in ourselves. We separate, we buy into the aspect that we are separate, that they're separate, that we do not belong to the whole, and the whole does not belong to us. I believe that it does transform into something else or mutate. And you said the word mutate and it gave me chills because I really feel like that's what cancer is. Cancer is this constant mutation of every time we cannot be with the energy that is up for us, that is saying we are separate, we have to mutate and change the energy, lower the energy so that we don't see it, we put it away, we put it onto somebody else, and it continues to fester. And it continues to be these gremlins that haunt us. What keeps you up at night?
Mm,
The judge. The judges keep you up at night. And the things that you are most petrified of. So finding your journals and hopping into the gap space, practicing, we were talking about the ability to check in with yourself. So if there's something that's coming up for yourself, what is the purpose of what comes out of your mouth? Does it have meaning? Is it life giving? If 90% of our time and our energy is judging what's happening in the world and we're just not doing anything, we're just speaking about it, what is the purpose? What is the movement forward? What is the life-giving nature of that? And I'll tell you, you start to have a lot more energy for yourself when you can just check in with that, knowing
mhm.
that there's always a judge on board. So you can even just check in and say, what judge is up right now? Because judges are not bad. What you
That's
want to
right.
do is you want to be able to cultivate the judges that can allow you to discern more effortlessly and more clearly about who you are, what you desire, how you want to move forward, with things that are inspiring you or that are in line for you in your life. That's what you want to do. When we ignore the judges, they take over and they're usually the punishment judges. And those are the ones that mutate life, they change the form, they narrow down the range and it becomes toxic.
Mm. Mm-mm-mm.
So
That is so true.
Yeah. So to go back to the gap is what I wanted to say, is that if you could take something today that you just ask yourself, what judges up? And this just may be new. So if it's new for you and you can't quite figure it out, just wait and notice when you have like a charge, perhaps, if you're upset at somebody, if you're upset at yourself, if you're sad, there's going to be a judge. So just let it emerge and notice, like, put the attention on you and notice what you're feeling. Where in your body are you feeling it? Whatever this charge is or whatever this feeling is. And then put your focus and energy on that judgment. So on that judge. Notice, what is the judge actually saying? What is it? What is its purpose? What is it? Is it punishment? Is it a discernment? Is it a protection? Just notice whatever you can notice, and then allow yourself to sit and bring your focus into the middle and just wait. You've already checked in with yourself, your experience. You've already checked in specifically with that judge. And now you hang out in the middle. And that is where we open Narnia's closet. That is where we open the energy for something more to come in, like I did when I even, I didn't do this exercise, but when I looked in the mirror and I really was able to, and that's how I did it, right? I was looking at myself, but I was also acting as the judge. And then in the middle is where all of that just started to transform and expand. And it was beautiful.
Hmm. I love that.
So
You're being with the gap. You're stepping into that gap space and it just feels whole, right?
it's the one and the two, it's the me and the judge. With that, as we can be with those things without just the poles that hold it into that concrete thing, that's when you're allowing for that energy to open up, that becomes even something greater than you could ever have seen if you were just in the judgment zone or the self-judgment zones. It becomes much more dimensional than just this and just that.
That's right.
And to come back to the very beginning, you will be judged. What now? There's plenty of things that we've talked about here that allow you to be able to build a new relationship with your judges, to be able to create more of a rapport with what's possible. And instead of having those judges be something that you're trying to put away, but they keep fighting to the front of the line, you keep them close to your bosom and you allow yourself to unlock them in that gap space. And that is the magic point, that point that goes into the quantum, where energy and time have this magical relationship where observing, you participate and influence what's possible between, in this case, you and that judgment, you and the judge. So what we're asking and inviting you to do is let us know how it goes. Are you doing some of these exercises? Try the gap exercise. Let us know. We had someone the other day draw a picture, and we have someone else who's been writing poems after the podcast. So what are these little magical gap moments that are happening for you? And please let us know, because it really lights us up and inspires us to continue the bigger conversation.
And I
So
love how that space is available under each podcast. There's a place to make a comment, ask a question, do a share. We have folks posting quotes that they thought of. All of that is welcome, seen, and heard. So please, we invite you in.
yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. Until next time. And now, Trevor Hall with Blue Sky Mind.